back in 1960 who had failed to anticipate the consequences of the rapid development of science and technology. A number of them were involved in the development of nuclear weapons. Einstein, Oppenheimer, Rotblat, and others, and realized how important it is that we understand much more about the future and act now with that understanding in mind. What could be more natural and self-evident to us as human beings than the fact that we are not simply passively conditioned by what has happened to us in earlier times or by universal and natural laws? We are conscious, adaptive, creative, imaginative human beings who aspire and act to realize an unrealized future, an unmanifest future. And yet, remarkably, we look back for the last 200 years, the phenomenal success of the natural sciences in progressing based on an understanding of causality from the past and present conditions has kind of overcovered and prevented us from freely and creatively thinking about the real role of our anticipations, expectations, anxieties, and imaginations about the future. And therefore, I consider this meeting and this initiative that the organizers have promoted as of immense significance, not for a narrow field of social science or action, but for all our understanding of human behavior and, as Roberto, I'm sure, will emphasize, of biological activity in a wider sense. In May of 1940, Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister of England just at the time when Europe was in the midst of war, and within a few days France surrendered to the Axis powers. And the Battle of Britain was about to begin. The assessment of Germany was that Britain would probably surrender even without a battle, and therefore they postponed the attack of Britain until end of July, early August. The assessment was that within 3 months the war would be over. Then Winston Churchill got on the radio with his very famous speech in which he essentially said, and I know you all know the words, "We will never surrender. We will never surrender. We will fight in the air, on the beaches, on the seas, on the streets, wherever it is, but we will never surrender." Was it an act of imagination? Was it an act of wishful thinking? Was it an act of expectation, hope, determination? But the fact of the matter is that within 3 months, the battle for Britain was over, but it was over because the Germans withdrew, and that became a critical turning point in the war. So we're talking about something of immense significance to human beings, whether it's at the global level or at the level of our lives. A relatively unknown fact that at the end of 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev and Chancellor Kohl were talking. I know this because one of the people who was in the room at the time is a fellow of our academy, told us, Alexander Lukatov. And they were speculating on the possibility or reality of the reunification of Germany. And they all agreed this is necessary, this is essential, this is desirable, this is inevitable. But their estimate was that it would probably take at least a generation or two. 2 days after their conversation, the Berlin Wall fell or opened up, the gates opened up. And within a year, it was in fact a reality. How important this issue is to our understanding of where we are and where we're going. Does the future exist is a question we're going to be discussing and debating in the next 3 days. And there are many views. In my view, the future already exists. It's real already. it's not manifest physically. We may say it exists, it's real, but it's unrealized. So what is the relationship between the real and the not yet realized? It's a profound question, not only philosophical, but practical, that we're going to be discussing. So impressive has been the progress of the natural sciences that we've come to think of rationality, logic, our very thinking processes have been grounded in the idea that causality comes from the past. And if we come collectively to a different view on this matter, it's not going to just affect our social sciences and our politics or our business. It's going to affect the very thinking processes of our own mind. When you look back at the great creative discoveries of history, you find an unusual thing, the great scientific discoveries, that in almost every documented case, the discovery itself was the result of a non-logical operation. Call it insight, intuition, or whatever else you may take it. And the scientific method has come afterwards to try to validate and determine the truthfulness of, the replicability of, an insight that was not arrived at by rational methods. Studies of great creative events show that the bringing together of apparently contradictory, unreconcilable opposites is the essential condition for a creative discovery, for a breaking out of the existing paradigm of thought into a new paradigm. I think this conference represents such an attempt to bring the future squarely into the present, juxtapose it to everything that's happened up until now, and look for a reconciliation. And I think whenever that happens, or in the measure that happens, and it's certainly not going to happen in 3 days. You don't found the discipline to get all the answers in 3 days. But whenever that happens, it's not going to just impact on our social sciences or our sciences in general. It's going to impact on our thought processes. And I believe it's going to make us more creative human beings than we have been up until now. So that's what I see as the significance. In another sense, this conference heralds the beginning of another type of paradigm change to fully restore the importance and legitimacy of the subjective factor in human affairs. The role of conscious intention, creativity, aspiration, values. And we will stop thinking of ourselves as simply a product of all our past experience and see how important is our future direction, our future conceptions, our imaginations and expectations and anticipations for that. I think this initiative also heralds a need for, and I hope the beginning of, a profound change in paradigm for education. Because at a time when the world is changing so quickly, when facts are being supplanted and multiplied so quickly, when what was true yesterday is no longer true today, we still have an educational system that is essentially grounded in studying the past, learning from the past, quoting our past understanding as knowledge, and putting it up somewhat in contradiction to what might come in the future. How can we had a meeting on this just last month in Dubrovnik, asking ourselves, what will the future education be? Not by which I mean, what will education be like in the future, but how will our education change to really understand and understand the impact of the future on what we are doing. There too, a paradigm change is needed, and I hope it's on the way. Today we face multidimensional challenges of unparalleled magnitude and complexity that defy solution by our existing concepts, institutions, and policies. We need a new paradigm in thought to help us effectively grapple with these challenges. We had a meeting last year in Dubrovnik, which Roberto was an active participant in, which we explored what that would mean for the social sciences in general and the future of social sciences. And I think we were all deeply impressed by the importance of what he told us about anticipation, as its future impact will be not just on philosophy, not just on theoretical conception, but on what the future of social sciences will be. So I'm anticipating very interesting discussions with the economists, sociologists, psychologists, and others on that. In one other sense, I gave the example of Churchill and Gorbachev and Kohl for another reason, because one of the other things that's happened because of our long dependence on the natural sciences as a model is we have tended to discount the importance of the individual. We have tended to look at phenomena in society as if society is a collective, the way other natural species are collectives in which they all behave in a pretty much the same way, like every electron and proton or quark or iron or gold molecule or iron element behaves. But what those two incidents show is that one individual has the power to literally change the world, and every one of us has the power to change our world and the life we're in. And how will our social sciences evolve in the future to reflect the reality of that power, that irony that we're all 1 in 7 billion, and yet each of us can make a difference vastly disproportionate to our representation in humanity as a whole. I think, again, anticipation will bring us back to this central issue, because it's the individual who starts the anticipation, starts it with a vision or an expectation or a fear or an aspiration, and from there it spreads itself. The course of human history has been largely understood in terms of the action of established powers, of laws, of institutions, and yet we see in history over and over again the power of an unrealized idea. We may call it an ideal, like freedom, or a value, whether it's a moral value or a political value or something else. I believe this discussion on anticipation will help us understand the central role of ideas, attitudes, values, which are so intangible that we might say they don't exist, or some people may say they don't exist, and yet they exercise such an inexorable, inevitable power on the direction of history. They're really the deep drivers of history. So this, too, I believe, is an issue directly relevant to our discussions on anticipation. An Indian philosopher once said that the earliest preoccupations of humanity and its earliest formula of wisdom may turn out to be ultimately the truest formula. And that formula was not the formula of stating what is or what will ever be, but of what we can aspire to become. And therefore, the concept of anticipation takes us back to really looking at ourselves as a species, where we have come from, where we're going, and what has really been driving that process all along. Finally, I'd like to mention the discussion topic that I'm sure is going to come up many times during the 3 days, and that is, how do we try to understand a future filled with uncertainty? And how do we anticipate a future filled with uncertainty? And what is the reality? How can we talk about the reality of a future and its action in the present when we don't know what it is and how uncertain it is? A wise philosopher once said that uncertainty and infinite possibility are two sides of the same reality. If there wasn't uncertainty, there would be no possibility except for what is there. And so, when we look at anticipation, are we really trying to guess or figure out what's going to happen? Or are we really trying to decide what we want to happen and we have the power to make happen in the future? I'd like to thank the organizers of the conference. It's a great pleasure for the World Academy to be involved with this event. Look forward to hearing all of your presentations, or as many as that's possible. And I hope and anticipate that this is only the first of many, many important events on this subject in the future. Thank you.